All right, so we are finally to our last video from my last trip out to Charles City. Took a minute to get here. This one I don't actually have an actual video. We're looking at some experimental tractors that are still floating around out there. Actually, they're not floating around; they are sitting at one spot. Um, and the reason I didn't get any video was because the gentleman that is current owner of them, is 99% sure that the information he has on them is correct. However, he has had a few people buck him on it because there is very little paper trail left to prove the research that he has done. And the reason that there is very little paper trail to prove what he has figured out is I did not know it. The experimental department out there at Charles City used to be down on the main campus, and in the mid to late '60s, I forgot to ask, and nobody actually did say the exact date. They just said that sometime in the late '60s there was actually a fire in the experimental department, and a lot of records and stuff were destroyed in the fire. And after the fire is when they built the separate green building that we've seen before in my video from 2 years ago, out kind of northwest of where the main plant was. So because of that, there's very little records or pictures or anything, whoops, to prove what he has figured out. What he has figured out has been mostly from the little bit of data he's been able to gather from the couple build cards that he was able to come up with for these tractors, and through word of mouth from people that were actually there at the plant when these things were built. So because of that, he didn't want to go on camera and tell the stories of these tractors and then turn around and have somebody say, well, no, that's wrong. Um, Understandably so. So, um, out of respect for that, I didn't get him on video, and I didn't actually video any of these tractors. But I could have taken video, but I didn't because I was trying to respect him and his property. But he did allow me to take some pictures, and that's what I've got here to show you. And I should have took more pictures, but by the time we got to these tractors, we were at a point in the day where we were running out of time with this guy, and I had to get back up to Osage to talk to some more guys that were coming there at a set time. So we were kind of coming to a point where we had to get on the road and get back up to Osage. So got four tractors here to show you. I'm going to throw the pictures up and I'll voice over them and explain to you what we're looking at. I screwed up when I took the pictures with my phone. I left my phone standing up instead of turning it on the side to get a full screen picture. I was, like I say, I was in a hurry because we were trying to finish up, and I didn't think about the fact that I needed to make them a landscape picture to get a decent. So you get the black bars on the side. I apologize for that, but is what it is. They're still cool tractors with some cool stories behind them. So anyhow, here's our first picture. All right, I'm doing this down in the barn so that I don't have a chance of getting interrupted. So if the sound's a little funny, that's why. It's because of the echo out here. So the first tractor we got is, and all these tractors are currently owned by the same, well, they're all sitting at the same owner's property. The next three that we see after this little 550 are technically all sold, but the new owner hasn't come and picked them up yet. Um, the current owner is downsizing his collection due to health issues. So, and this little 550 was for sale at the time. But so the next three we see after this have been sold. They haven't been picked up yet. But this tractor here is an experimental 550 Orchard. Not to be confused, there was a company here in Michigan, and I believe there was a company in California that offered fender retrofit kits where you basically just took a standard 550 and put orchard fenders on them, but there was no modifications to the seating arrangement or anything like that to make it a true orchard. It just, you put orchard skirts on a regular 550. This is an actual put together in the Charles City Experimental Department, purpose built 550 orchard. Unfortunately, the only two things he has to prove this are, and unfortunately it's been so long since I've been out there, I can't remember the year. This is a bar grill 550. It's not an egg crate grill. So there was a block of 15 550s, all of them diesel, all consecutive serial numbers, and the build cards all say sent to experimental. He knows of this tractor and two other ones that still exist. If I remember right, he said this one he found down in Arkansas, somewhere down on the Gulf Coast. He said when he got it, the orchard tin was like Swiss cheese. If I remember right, he said the top cowling over the steering wheel was missing, and this was his best recreation that he could come up with that fit the tractor. So that top piece is a recreation that he thought is best that it could look like, because there are no pictures. So the only proof he has is that build card data that this tractor by serial number and by build card was sent to the experimental department. And there were people that he was able to talk to that said, yes, they were built. However, this is one of the tractors that he's had quote unquote experts buck him on that said they never existed. But between a build card and people that were actually there, that's the proof he's got. And obviously the big thing you see is the orchard skirts. And I wish I would have took a picture from around behind it, because unlike the retrofit kits made here in Michigan, and I'm pretty sure there was one in California, where you just put fenders on it and the seating position remained the same. This was actually a purpose built. It got the cowling. It had a custom seat that moved the operator back behind the axle and lowered the seating position. The steering wheel and steering box, the angle was changed to match the lower seating position. The steering column was lengthened to get the steering wheel back by the operator where it needed to be. The front, this tractor was narrow. I bet it was probably under a 60-inch tread width. The front axle had been modified to get it that narrow. It had custom rear axles and rear axle tubes in it that were narrower than a regular 550. The hubs on it had been shortened to get inside the fender skirts. Normal 550, I can't remember if they're a 3 or a 4 U-bolt hub, but whichever way they are, this one had one U-bolt missing, and the hubs had actually been machined narrower to make them fit. Custom gauge cluster that moved everything back by the operator. I take that back. The gauge cluster was still up in the dash. The electrical box with the push button and all that stuff, and the choke were all moved up or moved back by the operator. It's a gas. It wouldn't be the choke. The shutoff cable were moved back by the operator so that you could actually get to them from the seat. Custom clutch pedals, custom brake pedals. The entire operator station on this is what you would expect out of an actual orchard tractor. And from what he told me, and from what he's been able to gather, the reason that the 550 was never offered in orchard configuration was because the executives were scared that it was going to take too much sales away from the 770 orchard, which was probably correct, because the 550, just by its nature, was a lot better suited for orchard use. And if you look at the way they laid it out, and just even in an experimental stage, if it would have had a little bit more development to fine tune some of what they had done to it, this was actually a well thought out and very nice little orchard tractor. And it's kind of a shame that it never made it into production. But like I said, he knew of at least two more that exist, but this is the only one that's restored. So this was the first experimental tractor that I got to see while I was out there. Okay, this next tractor is one of them that's been sold. This one in particular has an interesting story. It's just a run-of-the-mill 1950T. What makes this one special, and the reason that we're going to call it an experimental, this one actually went to John Deere. The story on this one's rather short because unfortunately we don't really have the John Deere side of it. But he was able to track down through some paperwork that during the development of the 4320, because it was their first factory turbocharged tractor, what John Deere did was they went around and bought a bunch of the competition models that had already been turbocharging. So he said they had this 1950T, they had an international, what would that have been, the 806 was there? No. Was the 806 turbocharged? Whatever the International's first turbocharge was, said there was an Alice. Basically, everybody's top horsepower turbocharged tractor that would have been around at the time, Deere went out and bought a model of each of them to do testing on. And they tried to hide it very well. The build card on this one actually says that it went to Delaware. So they purchased it in Delaware, brought it back to Waterloo, took it into their experimental department, tore it all the way down to the bare frame, checked everything out, put it all the way back together, and then took it out and did field testing with it. And they did the same thing to all the tractors that they bought. And this tractor was actually used by John Deere for experimentation while they were developing the 4320 for turbocharging. So, like I say, other than the story with the Deere, this is just a plain run-of-the-mill 1950T, but it's the Deere connection that makes this one interesting. So, short story on this one, but that's the story behind this guy. Next on our list here is an Oliver 1900 Power Pack disguised as a Ferguson road or sheep's foot compactor. What makes this special? The Power Pack does not have a serial number, and the engine in it, the serial number predates any 1900 production. The engine is older than the 00 series production. And the Ferguson is road roller conversion serial number 1. So, the running story behind this, and it's everything in it matches. It's not been repainted. The engine paint matches the Power Pack paint. It's not like it's been repowered. From everything that he was able to gather, and the running theory behind this is there's no build card data for the tractor either, obviously, because it has no serial number tag. There was no evidence there was ever a tag there. It's got a few things about it that weren't in the actual production tractors. So the running theory behind this one that he's been able to come up with from the little bit of information he's been able to gather on it was this Power Pack on this roller was actually one of the experimental test beds for the 1900 farm tractor development. And it was in Oliver's experimental department. They got through doing the experimentation that they needed to do with it. Ferguson wanted a Power Pack to develop a road roller on, so Oliver sent them this experimental Power Pack for Ferguson's experimentation. And Ferguson had a road roller conversion like this for the 1600, the 1800, and the 1900. They made 3 different sizes of them. This obviously the biggest one. Again, this tractor's been sold, but he said this one runs and drives. He said it's really fun to drive. It's got a reverse torque in it. If you see that big lever sticking up, you can see it kind of in front of the seat back. That's the reverse torque lever. This one doesn't have a foot pedal. It's just got a long lever. You push it forward to go forward. You pull it back to go into reverse. The only thing wrong with it is at some point during its life, the right-hand rear axle sheared off right at the edge of the axle housing. So it's only driven by the left drum right now. And he said to get it to move, you got to hold the right brake so that the diff doesn't spin. But that tractor right there is most likely one of the 1900 experimentals that was converted into a Ferguson road roller once Oliver got done doing what they needed to do with it. All right, and the final tractor on our list we're going to visit is this hulking monstrosity. Don't let the number or the spears on the side of the hood fool you. It's not an 1800. This is a 1900 with a 6V53 Detroit in it. And this tractor's got a little bit of a story. It's got a 1900 serial number, and he was able to find the build card for it, and there was 2 build cards consecutively that specified 2 1900s as custom builds, no minus engines. They came off the line that way. And from talking to people that saw it and were there, he was able to figure out that during the development between the 1900 and the 1950, Oliver was looking to put a 6V53 in the 1950 to up the horsepower, not have to turn the 453 harder. But they were worried, obviously, that the rear end wouldn't take it. So they took these 2 1900s, pulled them off the line without engines in them, and if I remember correctly, he said they were sent to a Detroit dealer down by Waterloo somewhere to have these 6V53s installed in them, and then Oliver brought them back and put them through their paces. Obviously, this one's got a regular row crop wide front on it, which was never offered on the 1900s. They didn't offer a row crop until the 1950s came out. He hasn't been able to determine if they came off the line modified with a row crop wide front, or if they would have had the regular industrial or standard wide front like the 1900s had in production. But basically, long story short, the experimentation did its job. They found out, fun fact, a 1900 rear end could not stand the extra added horsepower of a 6V53 pounding on it all day long, and they blew the rear end out of it. And now this currently has an 1800 rear end bolted up to it, which is probably where some of the tin came from, and possibly the wide front. But this tractor, like I say, he knows by the build card data, it was one of the tractors pulled off the line without an engine. And this tractor was actually found at a farm just down the road from where the XO121 was found. They had been actively farming with it, and if I remember right, this one still runs and drives. I don't think they managed to kill that 1800 rear end yet. But again, this one was sold when we were looking at it. And if you look in the background of the picture there is actually another 1900 with the correct rear end casting and stuff and all the parts needed to put this back correct to what it would have been while they were experimenting with it. So that's the story behind this one. Like I say, the owner could have told the stories a whole lot better, but like I say, he didn't want to go on and he wanted to make sure that he was 100% correct before he went and talked about them, and he was not comfortable since he couldn't be that 100%, but he was very, very confident that everything he knew about them was true. So like I say, all three of these last tractors have found a new owner. They just hadn't been picked up yet. So hopefully they're going to a good home. Hopefully they don't turn into some of those tractors that they get bought, and rather than staying in the public eye, they disappear and get lost to time. So, but I guess if nothing else, we got these pictures here to prove they were around, at least at this point. So I guess that's what we got for you. That should be the wrap up of our trip out to Charles City this year. And with that being said, that's it for this one. We'll catch you guys on the next one.